Welcome into episode 2 of Hoops Forum, presented by Radius Athletics and a Quick Timeout podcast. I'm Tony Miller, and again this week, I'm joined by co-host Randy Sherman. As usual, we'd love for you to be a part of the forum here. And for those of you that are watching, feel free to jump in, maybe ask a question, reply with a thought on something maybe that we're discussing. You can do that anytime by simply replying to this post. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to have you be a part of the show. Randy, why don't you kind of go ahead and introduce today's topic and get things going for us?
We'll do that. Today we got a good topic. I hope it's something coaches can benefit from. I would say, let me begin by just sort of reading some complaints that I sometimes get from coaches that I often hear. They go something like this. We just don't compete very hard. Or we play like we're scared or something. Or our guys or our girls just don't want it. These complaints pertain directly to what we're going to talk about today, and that's fostering competition. Today, we'll discuss the importance of competition, how to increase our players' competitive drive, and the link between competitive drive and game performance. So all things competition today. I'm looking forward to talking about it. I think I have some thoughts that maybe just run a little bit counter to some of the coach speak we hear around this. So I want to begin with a question for you, Tony, to get us started. Right. Oftentimes I hear coaches say that competitiveness is something a player is born with. Like a guy just has just this innate competitive drive that's like in him or in her, and the belief is they're born with it. Do you believe that to be true? And how much of that is true, and in what relationship is nature versus nurture when it comes to competitive drive? And just riff on that, man. Like, what are your thoughts around that mindset or that belief?
Have you taken the DISC assessment before? I know we were talking about it beforehand, but have you taken it before?
No, I don't think I have. I've taken some different personality assessments and things like that, but that one's not ringing a bell.
So we do this every year with our basketball team. It's something that our athletic director actually does with sports teams. He does a lot of it here around the country, and he's even actually starting to do some things overseas. Those of you that listen to a Quick Timeout podcast, he was on the show probably about 3 or 4 months ago and talked a little bit about it. It's a personality test. You basically fill out a bunch of assessment questions, turn that in, they run it through. Most programs don't have the finances to be able to do that, but there's some free versions of it online if you just go into Google and search in DISC assessment. And each of those letters stands for something. I won't get into all of them. The D is dominant. If you go and look up dominant and the DISC assessment specifically and look up kind of a description of what each of those are, one of the first words, if not the first word that you'll see in connection with that letter is they are a high level competitive nature. And so I think personally, there are innate features that are given to you, passed down from your parents that you instinctively are competitive. If you don't think this, just have kids. You have kids, and I've got one that is and one that's not, right? And you see that very early on. And you can argue the fact that it's something that they are taught over time, or they pick it up because you're competitive. And I think that's true as well. They're not. I don't feel that they oppose each other as far as thoughts, but they do work together. You do have some, and you also can foster that as well. And I'll talk a little bit about this later on, but something that's very interesting, once you start getting a group of D's together, it produces something very interesting. Just like if you get a bunch of the S's together or C's, having a mix of the different kinds can help with these different aspects. We've had it up here on the screen before, but even talking about the things that we see there, the athleticism, the skill, the basketball intelligence, a lot of that, we think that those are things that we can improve upon. I know some people will argue the athleticism, you can't improve upon that. I think that's incorrect as well, but that's a different discussion. But we think those 3 things you can improve upon them, but the competitiveness, you either have it or you don't. What are your thoughts in connection with that? Do they go kind of similar to what I'm talking about, or do you disagree with that?
I would say that maybe through a combination of like nature and nurture in our environment and things like that. I've even read some interesting stuff about birth order as it pertains to this, like whether an athlete is a firstborn versus a latterborn or something like that, whether they grow up in a big family and have, brothers and siblings and sisters and things like that, how that can impact it. I think the number one thing I would say would be there may be a certain base level of competitiveness that some of us just have in our personality, where I think coaches maybe could expand their thinking would be, okay, if someone is, say, like if we use a 1 through 10 scale, like someone's a 5 on the competitiveness, they're kind of right there in the middle. I think where what we shouldn't do is accept that's their ceiling and their floor, that they can't get more competitiveness into their persona. So just like any other trait, if I had a guy that was shooting 33%, I would want him from 3. I'd want him to get to 34. I'd want him to get to 35. Right. So I think where we go wrong is just to say, like, this mindset that, like, I just don't have any dogs or fighters or whatever. I think that's where we maybe ought to expand our thinking a little bit, that, like, yeah, there's guys who are tougher, grittier, whatever, euphemism you want to use, but whatever a player's level is, let's lift it up. Even if someone's a 9 or a 10, let's get them all the way up off the charts. Right. That's what I would say, that we maybe need a shift in our thinking.
And even from my experience having coached at the college level and being a teacher, I think that this is, as well as the other things that were listed on that, you accomplish the improvement through drilling it. And I think that kind of sets up the rest of the conversation that we want to have is, okay, so if it is something that can be nurtured, it will be easier with some than others because of what's already in them. But for the ones that it's not, like, how can we help them achieve that as well? But maybe even not understanding as coaches, I think this is something that I forgot early on or didn't quite understand early on, because I'm very competitive. I just didn't understand why they didn't get it or why they didn't want to do this. And so, even thinking about the nurturing of what we accept society-wise, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. We blame AAU. We blame video games. We blame a lot of these other things. How much of that blame is legitimate? And then do you have any ideas of how we can combat that?
I don't know how much of it's legitimate or not. That's a bigger question than I'm equipped to answer. I would say that it's non-pertinent information, though, because I'm in charge of this program. These practice minutes are my practice minutes. So if I don't like my players' competitive level, what good does it do to blame anything other than my interaction with them? That's it. So you can blame.
And I think
parents,
that's the big thing. The blame.
Video games.
Yeah, we want to blame other things and not take responsibility for, like, it's my team. This is my responsibility to improve it. I'm the victim of the situation. Well, it is what it is. I'm going to just try to get better players next year.
Yeah, I just think that there are steps that we can take. They're not oftentimes easy or immediate, but there are.
Yeah, for sure. Before we get any further, let me kind of take a quick time out here to talk to you about our partners over at 323 Sports. I've been working with these guys for the past 6 years now, and as far as team dealers go, they're the best. Their slogans, "Do it right," and I can attest firsthand that they'll do it right for you and for your program, whether that's gear, equipment, uniforms, they'll do it all for you. So give them a look. It's 323sports.com, or you can email them directly, sales@323sports.com. Let me go ahead and show them the poll that we put out this week. This is something that, if you're new to the show, we do this every week on Twitter, and I usually tweet it out. Randy will retweet it, so it's on one of our 2 platforms there. But the question this week, how would you rate the competitiveness of the players on your team? I think this goes to the point that we were talking about earlier. We as coaches have these high standards, right? And so only 14% would say great. The rest of us, there's room for improvement there. I see a big group the majority there in bold is 2, next to poor, which is like that's double digits. Do you feel like this is this accurate? Is there actually a lack of competitiveness, or are we looking maybe at something different there?
I think our poll is a proxy. It's a good question, and I would say the coaches probably answered true to how they feel about their players, but if you could flip it up, it's bell curve shaped, right? Like there's you could change the question on top and ask, how's your season going? Poor, good, average, great. It would look just like this, right? So I think this is just a proxy. The coaches who aren't having a good season are obviously going, oh, my guy's competitive level sucks. Or the guys that are winning, sitting there 15-0 right now, like our guys are great competitors. And then most people right in the middle. So I would say our poll is a proxy for just a general temperature of how the season's going for coaches. I would also say when if you could call it that other poll, the one that we had on at the beginning, I would say that I do concur somewhat with the results of it. That it was the last place finisher in this poll of the 4, sort of the reasons why we're winning or not winning. I do think that because it tracks with what I see on game night. Like I don't know that I ever had players who were just out on the court, like walking around, just letting their guy drive right by them, who just, a ball bounced off the rim and they stood there and they just were, like we players play hard on game night. They do. They sweat. Their uniforms are sweaty. They got bumps and bruises and they're exhausted after the game. Like it's not for lack of effort. Yeah. I think there's oftentimes a other problems. Do you ever watch that show House, where the doctor had to?
I have seen parts of it before.
Yeah, I've only watched a few episodes, but his job is to diagnose these sort of hard to diagnose diseases. And the reason they're hard to diagnose is because, there's other diseases that oftentimes present the same symptoms and they can throw off his thinking. Right. And I often think, we have other problems that just show up on game night looking like we're not competing very hard. But if you ask the player, like, I'm trying my best, coach, like I promise you, like, I'm not dogging it. I just don't see this as it came in last on my poll that I asked back in May, 18%. Saying, we don't have a competitive. Our guys will get after it.
Yeah.
So I don't know that it's a huge problem. And I kept throwing in the phrase game night, because to me, that's where, when we talk about someone that's a real competitor versus sometimes the competitor, is the difference between game night and the other days of the week. To me, a true competitor is competitive in practice. They're competitive in their preparation. They're competitive in the weight room. They're competitive in their preparation and practice on the court and the drills. Everyone shows up on game night ready to go, right? They're ready to shine. But that's only part of it. That's the easy part of it. A competitor, has perseverance. They compete even when things go against them, a bad referee call or a coach correcting them in practice and making them run a line for missing something in practice or something. They had consistent discipline as it pertains to their effort. And I think one thing that may be innate where we do tend to call people like natural born competitors is their fearlessness. Is that sometimes people that are competitiveness are fearless. They're willing to fail. They're willing to give their best effort, even if this may not work, we may still lose, but I'm still going to give my best effort. Or I may not get the starting position. I may only be the 6th or 7th or 8th man, but I'm still going to give my best effort trying. That's a competitor. So when you play hard, your teams play hard. I watch a ton of film, a lot of video across the board, big school, little school, college, girls, boys, men, women. On the game film, kids are trying.
Yeah. For those who are watching, I would like to hear, because I think this is one of those words as well, like we throw around like culture. What does that actually mean to you?
Yeah.
So for those who are watching, like what does that mean? If you want your kids to be competitive, what am I seeing on the floor other than just they're going hard? Because that's the phrase that I hear a lot. Like, what does that actually mean to you?
Yeah.
And here are some of the things. I don't want to answer that question for people as they put it in, because I'd like to see what people are saying. But my response to whatever is written on those responses, my question is, are you drilling those things? Because again, if it's just like skill, if it's something that can be taught, okay, so what are we actually teaching here? So for the last part of here, I want to talk about the practical suggestions. So we've been talking about what it is. It can be something that's changed. There are tangible aspects of it. Okay, so Coach, help me here. How do we improve in these areas? One of the things, even talking about going hard, I'll give you an example of this. I have plenty of kids who come to college, and I will put them through. It's very simple because they're by themselves, and I'll just say, okay, all right, let's go like 2-ball dribbling. Let me see what going hard looks like for you. I want to see if they can control the ball, if they can have the coordination to dribble 2 balls at the same time, up and down the floor, change of direction, that kind of thing. What I typically see is when they start out doing that, especially when they're by themselves, because I know a lot of coaches are listening to this and saying how stupid that is. And then they're thinking I'm using tennis balls as well. And now they're going to mock me and that kind of thing too, whatever. Okay, but they're in there by themselves. I want to see the skills that you possess. When they start dribbling that basketball, they're going about 2/3 speed.
Yeah.
But they think that they're going hard. So in that case, it is, I'm going fast. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
They think that they're going fast. And by the way, thinking that they're going fast, we often communicate that as going hard.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we end up with is just a bunch of people, the old John Wooden. There's a lot of activity, but not much achievement going out there on the floor.
Yeah.
Are you talking to me about diving on the floor for loose balls? Are you talking to me about being mentally engaged when the game starts? Like, there are just so many, I think, again, just so many vague, when we're talking about competitiveness, that your players don't even know what you're talking about. And so this kind of goes back to our point that you and I have talked about previously. If you have something that you want to make tangible, then your players better know what you're referring to when you're saying, hey, we need to be going hard. Yeah. This kind of leads us into the next thing. Actually, before we do, you any thoughts on that?
Well, I want to ask you a question, because it's something you and I talked about earlier in the week about, where I would want to maybe think that where coaches would get some benefit from this conversation would be what they're attributing to a lack of competitiveness. Mm-hmm. How can we address that? And one of the things you and I talked about this week was the idea of, like, my team has slow starts. Mm-hmm. We come out of the gate, and by the time we look up after the first TV timeout or at the end of the first quarter, we're down 18 to 5, and then kind of we competed the rest of the game. But so, and I do hear coaches attribute that to, like, we're not tough, we're not ready to play, we're scared. What are your thoughts on making the connection between this idea of competitive drive and slow starts on game night?
I was actually just asked this by a coach this week, and my response to him was something that we've tried to improve upon in our program, and it has seemed to help. It is not the immediate easy fix, but it is something that I do believe can impact and help your team become more competitive. I simply ask him, how competitive are you in your practices? If it was good enough for John Wooden to feel like I got all my work done in practice, I can go and sit up in the stands during a game. That preparedness has happened in practice. And so something that I suggested to him, he said, we get off to slow starts when the game starts, right? I'm assuming that doesn't mean every quarter. I'm assuming that means like when we get in the game and it goes right away. And my question to him was, how competitive are your practices when you get in the gym right away? I know a lot of coaches and a lot of programs, and we've done this at times. The guys get done with their stretching, and then the coach brings everybody together, and we talk for 3 minutes about the kinds of things that we're going to be practicing that day. Mm-hmm. And then we ease into practice, and our excuse is, well, I don't want to go too hard at the beginning because we don't want to get anybody hurt. So this year we completely did away with the stuff at the beginning. We told them, you get there early to practice, you do your routine, whatever. We will do a quick dynamic warm up when you get in the gym. But as soon as that warm up is over, it's onto a 4-on-3 drill, a small-sided game of some sort. Like, we are competing right from the very start.
Yeah.
And I think so much of this is connected to the mental side of it. And it is a mindset. Like, when I come in here, are we competing, and are we competing? I think the question and it's a bigger picture. Like, is competitiveness something that you emphasize throughout practice? Is it something that you do from the start? Is it a mindset that your team has? You say, well, we're not focused. Well, are you requiring them to be focused in practice, or are they just mindlessly going through drills that maybe they're improving skills, but there's no decision making? There's no, I'm going against this other guy and we want to win and we want to compete. There are no consequences to losing. They're not feeling it anywhere, and they're not thinking about it. So why do you think that your games are any different? It's like putting together, I don't bake, but I watch a lot of baking shows because I'm married. So, we watch cooking shows, and I put together all the batter for my cake, and I put it in there. And when the oven opens, I see a cheesecake.
Yeah.
No, you don't see a cheesecake. You see whatever you just baked and put into the oven, right? When it was put under pressure and under heat, it turns into what it is. Why do you expect that you've put together all the ingredients through the week, and then you put it in the oven and it gets under pressure and it turns out to be something that you haven't been the whole week?
Yeah, that's a good analogy. I think when I reflect on my time as an athlete, which was short, I was just high school, a little bit of college, but I think about the different teams I was on, and I think about them through this lens of this word competition. And what were the most competitive environments and the least competitive environments? And here's one common trait that I would say that made for terrible competitive problems was if the starters feel like they're and the backups feel like their job can't change, you're going to have a terrible competitive environment. So one of the things I would encourage, and it's a connection that I've had coaches sort of like, what? Like, is if you want to have better competition, more competitors, more, guys who are willing to get on the floor, get after it, whatever word you want to use for all of that, develop your second string. A guy I like to read a lot of his work named Dr. Fergus Conley. I've read a lot of his books. He even theorizes in one of his books called 59 Lessons. One of his lessons is your second string is more important than your first. Like 9 out of 10 coaches don't see that. They don't see that. The best thing you can do for your competitive environment is to be able to remove a player, put someone else in, and win anyway. Instant fix.
Yeah.
Instant fix, but take some effort and intentionality to get there. I have talked to coaches, Tony, who have told me like they avoid competition and competitiveness in practice because when we go good on good, like, man, things get a little rough and edgy and so we just beat up on our second team or our JV all the time. Like, I'm like, man, that's a recipe for disaster. I make the light switch analogy of like when you walk into a dark room and you're finding the light switch on the wall, like you can't wait till game night to find that light switch.
Yeah.
So I talk to coaches who genuinely like, no, man, I don't like to we don't go good on good. We just get our first team against second team and these guys feel like they can't lose their spot. These guys feel like they can't win more playing time. And then you're going to find yourself saying all the time, come on, guys, give me a little effort. Come on, guys, come on, give me a good look. Come on. Like that's when you find yourself saying those type of things like, come on, guys, a little energy, a little pep in your step. Let's go. Like that's fake manufactured competitiveness. And that ain't it.
Right.
That ain't it.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Totally agree.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, you talked about the playing time. I think we were both kind of thinking about kind of the kinds of players that you put onto your team. I think probably with a high school team, you're kind of stuck with who you got.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you.
Yeah, go
That
ahead.
brings us to that. Like you coach at the collegiate level, so you do, to a certain degree, get to select the players that come into your program. You invite them, and they're not perfect, but when you are evaluating players through watching AAU game films, they send you things like that, interviews with their coaches. Where does their compete level kind of enter into your evaluation of that player, and whether you decide to bring them into a program or not?
This has changed, honestly, within the last 3 years because of the work that we've done with the DISC assessment. So let me give you an example from last year. When we took the test last year, we had a lot of players that were in that S and C category. We had, I think,
and what do those stand for?
They're steady and compliant, a couple of different words that are used with it. The I is somebody who, not an initiator, someone that provides feedback and encourages and that kind of thing. So we had a lot of S's and C's, they're great. Those are great people to have. Mm-hmm. But when you don't have a lot of D people, you lack the dominance and the leadership and it's the guys who just take over. It's the guys who just step forward and lead. You could probably immediately think of a lot of guys NBA who would fit in that. But when you don't have that, then that competitiveness, it's lacking in the guys. Again, they work hard, they get along with each other really well, but there is not a competitive edge to it. Whereas on the other hand, there's another program who we're connected with, who their team is heavily D's. And they kind of have the other side of the spectrum where they're very competitive, but that can cause some problems as well too, if that's all you have. And so I think the key that we've really tried to look at here is the right balance of the D's, the I's, the S's, and the C's, so that we have a team that's working together and you're not necessarily deficient in one of those areas. So yes, I mean, it has become a big part of what we do. As I sit there and recruit a kid, I'm kind of thinking about their personality, not just their skills and how their skills fit into what we're doing, as we would think of basketball skills. It can be difficult though. And this comes, those of you that are high school coaches, I would encourage your players to really get to know the coaches that they're interested in playing for. Mm-hmm. Because I honestly believe that a lot of the problems that we're having where people are done with that school after their first semester or their first year is because of that word that you and I have used a lot, but it's the fit in the program. Like, how does this kid fit within the program? And what that means is, how do they fit? Yes, in the school, but how do they fit with the personality of the coach? How do they fit with the other players who are on the team? And for long-term success and lasting, and within our topic today, the competitive nature of the program, you got to have a mix of those players. And so, I mean, it has become a big part of what we do. Yeah,
I would say too that don't let your eyes fool you. Maybe when you're evaluating players, but sometimes you'll see, like, say you're watching a football game or a basketball game, and a guy gets subbed out, or like in football, maybe the offense left the field, they punted the ball away, and you get the guy who's on the sideline and he's mad. You get I'm a Cowboys fan. Des Bryant was known for, he'd be on the sideline just ranting and raving and yelling, and you hear the commentator say something to the effect of well, he's just a competitor. I mean, he's mad, and it looks intense, and but like,
he made you be a baby.
Yeah. I mean, he's mad because he's a competitor and things aren't going well for the offense. And I mean, okay. But like, if he's a competitor, why am I reading reports that he was late for practice on Monday? Why am I reading reports about he showed up overweight, out of shape? Not talking about Des Bryant, I don't know, but like other things like no, he's just mad today. Mm-hmm. He's mad about the game, and he's not getting the ball, or he's not getting enough shots. But like, he's not a competitor, because if he was a competitor, then I wouldn't be reading that other stuff. Yeah. So I think if you're just evaluating a player's competitiveness level by watching them play in a game, in an AAU game or a high school game, you might get a false positive.
Yeah.
you might get a false positive. Like, man, this guy's really competitive. I mean, you talk to their coach and go, he got a temper is what he is. He's temperamental is what he is.
Yeah,
you can call it what you want, but like, there may be something that's giving off this guy's edgy. He's competitive, but if you're not competitive in your preparation, your ability to kind of take the next play mentality, you're just kind of a fake competitor.
Yeah. So let's just finish with this. So it could be something that maybe we've already said. I'll give mine here at the beginning. Maybe I'll steal yours, but
okay, 1
or 2 or 3. I'll just give 1. Practical ways to improve competitiveness for your team.
Okay.
And mine is just simply is to compete. I mean, compete more in your practices. That has been revolutionary for our program. It's the amount of small-sided games and playing 5-on-5 with restrictions. It's not just playing for 5 minutes straight and then at the end giving a few comments, but whether that's 3 possessions and then bringing them together, or a time and score type game that you have, but like foster competition by competing. It sounds simple, but I think that probably if coaches evaluated what they're doing in practice, are you actually competing in practice? That would be my main one.
I would echo that. I would say, track, chart, and reward all that.
That's great.
If it's just, hey, you guys won, and you don't have to run the suicide. You can go on and get a drink, and you other guys got to run it down and back for losing. And it doesn't actually like how has winning in the drill?
Yeah.
Does that impact my playing time? Yeah. That's if it doesn't. Cool. I mean, maybe it made for a good spirited competition in practice, but yeah, that's going to tail off. Yeah. I would say another tactic I used when I coached was what I call S-curving. And by that, I mean, like if you've ever done like a fantasy football draft or something, how, like you've got a group of guys and you got the first pick, you got the second pick, you got the third pick, then then if you're the 4th guy in the league, you got the 4th and the 5th pick, and it kind of makes a snake, right? So what I did with my roster, whenever we played 3-on-3, I did not let the girls pick their teams. When we played 4-on-4, it wasn't like, okay, just get in groups of 4. I was intentional about, I took our top 4 players, split them up, our next, and made 4, like say I got 12 guys or 12 girls. I made 4, if we're doing 4-on-4, I made 3 equal teams of 4. As best as I could as a coach. So every quartet of players has an A player, a B player, a C player, and a D player. So where in theory, as long as I do a good job making the teams, we're going to have a 3-on-3 or a 4-on-4 session where we've got 3 teams who really none's going to just run away from the other. And now let's see who wins.
Yeah.
Now let's see who wins. I get pushback from that when coaches like, I want my starters to play together. And I'm like, I want 12 starters.
Yeah.
I want 12 starters because I want that competition level where, all right, well, you got 2 fouls in the first half. That was stupid because I'm going to put her in. We're going to win anyway. So, like that's where we got to get to. So that S curving of your groups, make a little bit more intentionality. Like, okay, guys, we're going to play 3-on-3 cutthroat, create your teams. What are the 3 most competitive, talented dudes? I'm going to come here. They're going to get, Yeah. So now let's split them up and see, and then track your wins. When we've got 4 equal teams of 3, 3 equal teams of 4, who won? Who actually, when it comes down to like, okay, it's 11 to 11 to 10, last trip through 3-on-3 ping pong here, who's going to win? That's when you get the cream rising to the top. So that would be my number one is take away that starters backup mentality and develop your whole roster through S curving. And then your floor raises as a team. I don't evaluate coaches by the ceiling of their roster, because a lot of that, like they got 2 or 3 great players who they're 6'9". Okay, cool. Or they're super talented, or their dad was in the NBA or something like the ceiling of your roster ain't you, coach.
Yeah.
The floor is. You show me your 10th player. Can they dribble? Can they pass? Can they shoot? Can they kind of be an adequate contributor? That's you.
Yeah. Yeah. We've been doing that for the last 2 years, and it's completely changed the way that our program is and the kind of players that they're becoming. And we're only 2 years into it. And we've got a ton of freshmen and sophomores. So the wins aren't there yet, but I'm I'm really excited about junior and senior year because I think that it's going to pay off. I'm quite confident it's going to pay off. So yeah. Okay. So end of episode 2. Appreciate those who tuned in and participated. Be sure to tune in next week. We're probably planning again to do this again on Friday, every Friday through the end of the basketball season. We haven't really announced when that is. We're going to kind of go week by week, but throughout the basketball season at least, and be on the lookout on Twitter to know exactly what time that is going to be on. For Randy Sherman, I'm Tony Miller. Appreciate you all tuning in. We'll talk to you again next week.